Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad that you're here, and we are pleased to be able to share with you our first-time journey in creating an openly published book. We hope that by sharing with you our process and lessons learned, we can be of help to those of you who are similarly interested in taking on such an adventure. This presentation is the first in a series that runs from today through January. Given that we are all still adjusting to online teaching, where students can be learning from anywhere in the world, and the typical course materials may not be as readily accessible as they once were, we hope that this series with our chapter authors provides new ways of thinking and new partnerships to seek out. We encourage you to attend as many of the workshops as you can. First, let's meet the editorial board. While just 3 of us are leading today's talk, we take pride in representing this fantastic group of 9. We also have a few extra members in the audience, and we imagine they'll speak up at different points. As Open Pedagogy Approaches was, at its core, a local professional development project, we invited members from the UR community to share this journey. Not everyone asked took us up on the offer, but still we maintained a good variety of collaborators. An archivist, 5 liaison librarians representing humanities, social sciences, and STEM, a digital humanities librarian, a faculty member from our writing center, and Alexis Clifton from a neighboring college, SUNY Geneseo, who brought in years of experience working with OER publishing. I am Kim Hoffman, Director of Learning Initiatives for the River Campus Libraries at the University of Rochester. Moving clockwise, I am joined by Kristen Totelben, Librarian for Modern Languages and Culture, and Bob Berkman, our business librarian. We'll be diving into the inner workings of Open Pedagogy Approaches, but in brief, it is an OER collection of 22 published case studies of OER and Open Pedagogy. In those case studies, collaborative faculty, library, and student partners highlight their projects and share openly licensed materials so that those interested can take and reuse, modify, share again, etc. We intentionally use the term library as opposed to librarian, since the actual roles of participants in these partnerships varied. Over the past 2 years, the editorial board amassed an incredible community of contributors, and we had some key partners in the process that served as our backbone. We are deeply thankful to all of our partners in this collaborative effort. The final result is an open book, published using an open process, and we want to share that with you all today. So where did all this begin? It happened a bit by surprise, actually. On April 28, 2018, Open Pedagogy champion Robin DeRosa presented at the U of R campus. As I listened to her ideas, I was immediately drawn to my earlier days at SUNY Geneseo, where much of my focus was on engaging students in the learning process via information literacy skills, as I closely collaborated with professors. We had introduced lessons and projects that utilized wikis and Wikipedia, that encouraged student-driven research over using one main textbook, and that led students to create interesting explorations into their topics via multimodal tools. It wasn't until I heard Robin speak that I realized the work I had been doing was a piece of a bigger movement, so light bulbs went off. Add to that some experience I had in co-editing another book just a few years prior in 2016 with a traditional publisher. I just want to mention kudos to Allison Brown, who designed this beautiful book cover as well as the one for the Open Pedagogy Approaches book. So if anyone else has spent sleepless nights because your mind won't slow down, this story might resonate with you. The night of Robin's talk had my mind buzzing with these different connections. I didn't want to lose any of my ideas, so I wrote to my boss and a peer collaborator at the library. I certainly didn't expect them to respond at that hour of the night. There's no content here as I add a couple of different images, but follow the sequence of timing as I wrote them. By the end of the following day, I had written up a project proposal which comes very close to the reality of our finished book. Much of this tied to aspirations we had included in our library strategic plan, and other ideas were simply driven by passion for this kind of collaborative work. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't put a spotlight on this partner, Alexis Clifton. Without her expertise in OER publishing, her similar passion for open pedagogy, and our connectedness through SUNY Geneseo, even though our paths officially did not cross there, this project would not have happened. She was our missing link to make this book possible. With a metacognitive strategy at its core, Open Pedagogy Approaches is much more than just a typical book. If we follow this cycle in a counterclockwise fashion, I can elaborate on each point. As mentioned, the book in itself is an OER with a collection of case studies focused on OER and open pedagogy. And they highlight the innovation that can happen when instructors, libraries, and students collaborate. It was really important for the editorial board to emphasize the different ways in which libraries in particular engage in this growing area of scholarship and practice. It's a model for open practices while publishing. The editorial board takes a lot of pride in practicing what we preached as we adhere to how OER work best. And that is, taking something, being able to modify it, being able to share that new product. And we simultaneously leverage the benefits of transparency and openness as we work with our collaborators. In the bottom right-hand corner, this book is also the product of an open pedagogy course. At the time that we were working on it, there was a University of Rochester course focused on the principles and practices of copy editing. And so we adopted that course and had them adopt this project as their focus for applying the skills they were learning in class. As a result, 4 of our chapters have been co-edited, or copy-edited, by students in that class. And then finally, this project is now a springboard for all of us who are involved and can continue practicing the skills that we gained. And for those who are reading the chapters, they can consider innovative ways to approach course design, including required readings. All of this helps to level the playing field for students and raise their profile as more than capable knowledge creators.
So hearing about this project from Kim, who's my supervisor, I jumped at the opportunity for several reasons. So one reason was I wanted to learn about open pedagogy. We have an open educational resources working group in the libraries, and it's something that we're all working to learn more about so we can practice it. I also was interested to know specifically, I wanted concrete examples of how librarians can get involved with this so that when I do work with a faculty member or approach them, I have concrete ideas of explicitly what I can contribute to a project. I was very interested in gaining editorial board experience. I had reviewed articles before, but never served on an editorial board. I wanted to have an opportunity to create a work that could have a large impact, focusing on equity and empowerment in student learning and work. I'm very interested in designing assignments or activities that revolve around students as creators of content. And from hearing the description of this book, it seemed that it would make a big splash. And I was very excited about that. And I also wanted to work on a project with not only my coworkers, but people outside of my normal network of people I work with to learn more from them. And this did that.
So when Kim first announced back in 2018 that she was looking for people on her staff to get involved and work on this, I was really excited. And my own motivations are outlined here. The first one was, I just thought it was really cool to be part of what seemed like a very significant trend in scholarly communications and education. Open was gaining traction. I also attended the DeRosa lecture and was also very motivated by what she was saying. And just thought this was a great trend, something very positive, pretty exciting, and I thought it'd be very, very cool to be able to make a small contribution in that. Also, my own personal background was in publishing and writing and editing, so that this would also be a good match in terms of anything that I've done in the past. I could also add to the group in terms of contributing anything that I've done in the past, so it would also be able to play a role here. I also very much was enthused about being involved in something that has a strong ethical component, that there is a strong ethics behind the open pedagogy and OER. And that to me made it a much more meaningful project where you could really make a difference and really, help be a positive force. So that was also a motivation. And finally, it sounded like both a challenge to create a new book as a team, especially an edited compilation, which I had never done before, and also sounded like it could be fun too. So those were my motivations. Also, we did hear back from contributors as to what was their motivations in participating. So you can kind of browse this yourself a little bit, but you can see this is just a sample. So a first person here, Amanda Wentworth, talked about she just liked the idea of the whole concept of everybody coming together and sharing their experiences, all in one guide. So the idea of pulling it all together. And the other person thought that it would also be great to be actually part of an open publishing project itself. Again, coming back to that meta, open about open. And then also just for her own professional development, something that would help her move along in her own professional life. So there's a lot of different motivations here.
Okay, so now you have an idea of how we all came to this project, but let's talk and get a little bit deeper into the work that we actually put into it. So the editorial team knew that we wanted to create an open finished product. We had to figure out what our end goal was and when that would ultimately be accomplished, and then be able to walk back the steps that we would need to get there. Given the content focus of this book, we all knew that it had to be published openly. You can't use a traditional publisher if you're talking about open content. This was a daunting process, as we were all pretty much newcomers to the process, and we would not have that publisher to fall back on. Thus, we brought in Alexis, the expert. Bob will talk later about the rubric that we shared alongside our call for proposals. But this kind of transparency was a big leap for us. Yet when we put it into practice, it affirmed our commitment to utilizing open practices throughout the entire course of the book. And not every tool that you see here was open in and of itself, but we selected tools that really helped us to collaborate more effectively. We'll talk in more detail about our work with Rebus and how we use tools like Jotform, Google Drive, and Airtable. So you're going to keep hearing about Alexis, but one of her first big contributions was connecting our project to the Rebus community. We had heard Robin DeRosa talk about Rebus, but Alexis actually had the personal connections, which was a huge boon for us. If you don't know, Rebus is a Canadian nonprofit organization that is committed to the area of open publishing. They serve as the hub where like-minded open educators can share their projects from beginning to end. They can give advice and bring in volunteer contributors. They provide a platform where the progress can be tracked, advertised, and even celebrated. And as a huge advantage, they offer the support system for authors and editors who are new to these open publishing practices. We're so very grateful for the unwavering support that Zoe Hyde-Wake and Purva Ashok have given to us for this project. So using their platform really helped frame our process. And this is a screenshot of our project's homepage. And we can kind of give you a little tour to give you a sense of the different supports that they provided. So visibly here at the top, you can see the different stage of where your book is. And so we are obviously at adoption and release, but some people are just kind of in the idea formation stage. But this is a great reminder of the different milestones that we need to hit. And down below as well, you will see the project timeline. So that kept us going and on track. You'll see obviously a description of the book, and then an outline of the chapters once we had them selected, and that allowed others to gain an interest in our project and follow the project. Alexis and I used the platform to call for participation at various stages, and Apurva and others at Rebus would send back encouraging notes and congratulate us on the progress. And so you can see those conversations over here on the side. This section on resources allowed us to share back variations of different documents that we were generating and modifying. So that could include the wording for our call for proposals, our author agreements, our evaluative rubric for selecting the chapters. All of those things are now open for others to use. And I've heard Alexis say that our book was not the standard textbook, obviously, and more of a scholarly publication. So the tweak on these documents can be helpful for others moving forward. Between this homepage and our series of Google Docs, Rebus provided the structure before we eventually moved all of that content over to the final version in Pressbooks. I want to make a special note here for those of you interested in open publishing, but you're not quite ready to actually put a whole book together, because who is? Rebus provides a really perfect entry point into this world so that you can get your feet wet. So just as we called for prospective authors and peer reviewers and copy editors, Rebus has their directory of ongoing projects. And so if any of those interest you, I definitely encourage you to follow those projects and volunteer to do some of that work. As Alexis and I have said in a couple of presentations, many hands make light work.
Yeah, so basically we can split up our whole process into what we've determined as 6 major categories or 6 phases. There was the phase 1, which is all the upfront prep and decisions. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do it? The second phase was the acceptance process in terms of when we received a call for proposals and when we evaluated the different proposals. There was a first and second drafts that the contributors had to send in that we then reviewed. And then there was a peer review process, phase 4, then copy editing, phase 5, and then finally the production portion of the entire book process, which was moving to Pressbooks. And we're going to take a little time and go into a couple of those phases specifically and give you some details. And I'll begin talking about phase 1, which is really the preliminary work. So there were several things we had to do really, once Kim made the announcement and she got some people to express some interest and said, yeah, hey, sign us up, we're ready to go. Okay, so now what? So one of the very first things we did, importantly, not something to overlook, you might not think about it, but hey, is everybody who said they want to do it, do they have the time to do it? Do they think they're actually going to be able to devote how many hours? And how many hours is this thing going to take over the next year or a year and a half, whatever it might be? Do we even know? We really couldn't tell for sure. We were able to make some best guesses, we'll take X hours to review the first draft. And so people really had to make sure that, once we kind of figured it out that, yep, I'm ready to go. And, flying a little bit blind, but with some figuring like we'll make it work out if we want to, the people were able to figure out, yep, we're going to commit the time to this. That was the first preliminary. The second thing was really determine the scope of the book. What should this book really include? What should it not include? What do we really mean by open pedagogy anyway? And what will the readers think it means? Is it the same thing? Do we need to define it? And also, we know we wanted library and faculty partnerships. That was key and open. But, digging down, what does a library faculty partnership really look like? We wanted equal partnerships. We didn't want just somebody kind of hanging and supporting someone else. We had to really kind of drill down on all this. We made sure we knew ourselves what we were doing. We couldn't communicate very well to others if we didn't know ourselves. So really pinning all those things down was pretty critical. We also kind of came up kind of organically in a sense was, we have some guiding principles and ethos on this. And open does embody a lot. There's a lot to it. And one of the key elements is transparency. So, and also as part of open is respect and ethical treatment for others. So we really did our best, both, deliberatively and sort of instinctually to act in the spirit of the book. And that meant making our process as open as possible. That meant sharing, for example, the rubric itself. So when we told the contributors we're going to use a rubric, we made sure they knew it. Kristen is actually going to show an example, a piece of what the rubric looked like. The author agreements, everything really we tried to be totally transparent. And then in the same spirit, of open and transparent and a two-way and a dialogue and being equal, we also thought about, when we did get when we did get chapters back from authors and we didn't see that certain ones really did what we were looking for, there were some problems. We really made a conscious effort to make sure any critiques and suggestions and issues were done in a way that, were kind and thoughtful and how we'd want it be told ourselves. So we really tried to make that very consciously an ethos. So then we said, okay, now we gotta create this call for proposals. And we worked pretty hard for a while on how to word it. Luckily, we had the concept down, but every word kind of matters. And being both librarians and writers, and we had a couple of really good people that have done a lot of this really good wordsmithing. We really worked hard on this. I'll just show you just a little example in a second in terms of what it looked like. Let me just get to here. So can you see the call for proposals? Just a thumbs up. Okay. So basically, I'm certainly not going to go through this whole thing, but you can see that what we want to make sure is give people the focus of the book, really making sure we define things clearly. I'm just going to minimize something so I have access to this. So we want to define it. We want to make sure we did that. We want to make sure there wasn't any confusion about what we even mean by open pedagogy and what do we mean by openness here. And we even provided our own definitions for academia. We made clear about the book structure so they could visualize a little bit what is this going to look like eventually, and that we were looking for practical, creative, and collaborative approaches. And we want to give everybody the big picture too. So why are we even doing this? Okay, well, there are 3 goals that really we set out here. Okay, so it's really having full information. And then of course, the specifics, the proposal guidelines, of course. And then again, we had a link to the rubric and there was a document. So this is just a little glance. And again, this is all part, you can find this here, and this is in the resources section in the book. Under call for proposals, along with the other materials that were used to create this book. So then when we finally said, okay, this looks like a good call for proposals, and it went through a lot of drafts and a lot of like half an hour discussion on this word or that word. And sometimes you wondered if it was kind of worth it, or at least I did, but I think it was in the end. Then we said, okay, all right, now that we've got this, where are we going to find these people? So luckily, with the diversity of librarians and professors and technology experts and different people, you all had access to the really good listservs. And this is a selection, I think, of pretty much most of the listservs we sent this out to. The College of Librarians. I'm a business librarian, so I'm on the business librarian list. Others are on open networks, the Rebus network itself, some local listservs of librarians and so forth. They really kind of put it all out there, actually. And so this is also all in the preliminary part of the process here. So we put it out there, wondering, will people respond? And we were pretty excited when we got our first 1 or 2, and that was exciting. And then, of course, we had to decide up front is, well, how are we going to evaluate the submissions? And we really worked hard on creating a very clear, precise rubric, which was laid out like the 5 or 6 things we're looking for and how well each one did, and very clear. And as I said earlier, Kristen will show a little piece of what that looked like. So this is all our getting ready, and then we're off to phase 2, and I'll hand it off to Kristen here.
So now we're to phase 2, receiving submissions, evaluating proposals, and notifying authors. So as Bob mentioned, these forms, all these different rubrics or types of documentation are at the end of our book. Bob and Kim developed the rubric and shared it with the editorial board to provide consistency in evaluating proposals. The criteria was also shared with those who submitted proposals so that they would know specifically what we were looking for. Proposals were submitted via JotForm, a form building which is form building software. Proposals included they were categorized as 16 textbooks, 18 student projects, and 16 open pedagogical design case studies, kind of examples. Kim and Alexis created a Gmail account exclusively for all things related to the book, and the editorial board also interacted later with authors via this address. Authors were notified within a month and were asked to read and sign an author agreement form. And then on to phase 3. To prime the editorial board for reviewing the first drafts, the editors made a guide adapted from the Rebus guide to publishing open textbooks. In pairs, editorial board members and editors reviewed the first drafts, giving constructive feedback. So now we would be on to phase 4. Each time the pair combination was different to provide diversity of perspective and expertise. Most members reviewed at least 2 chapters during the almost 2-month-long process. As you can imagine, there were varying levels of work that needed to be done for authors in their draft revisions. After the second review, the editors sometimes stepped in to make further revisions in preparing the drafts for peer review.
So when it came time for peer review, we used Rebus to get the word out among its community, and then we reached out via those listservs that Bob had shown you previously. We also used our local channels, never forgetting that one of the U of R team's main purposes was to engage as many of our instructors and grad students and library staff as possible. With all the volunteer names in hand, Alexis saw that we needed a better project management tool and suggested that we migrate over to Airtable. It does a much better job at connecting sheets and related information across a really large project like this. With this information organized, we started matching peer reviewers to chapters. This was done really deliberately, matching volunteers' job roles to the preference that they gave for general topic, that would be textbook as replacement or student projects, and other areas of expressed interest. We were committed to balancing 2 peer reviewers per chapter, where one of those perspectives came from the library and the other perspective came from a non-library faculty member or staff. Our peer review was open, meaning that authors and peer reviewers' names were not masked, and review comments were added directly to the chapter drafts in Google Docs. As well, there was an evaluative form that each of the peer reviewers completed, kind of grading different areas that we wanted to see within each chapter. So we're getting to the end, and now we're in copy editing phase. So we use the very same process to reach out and find volunteers for copy editing as we did before. The only difference, of course, was that we were simultaneously working with this U of R class, Practices and Principles of Copy Editing. Alexis developed new publisher copies of each chapter, as you see here, in our Google Docs, so that the editing process could be done outside of the eyes of the authors. We didn't need to bog them down with all the tiny typos and, slight adjustments in grammar, etc. With a provided copy editing guide in hand, our editors used the suggested edit feature in Google Docs and added in comments along the side. The most helpful of these edits included a reference back to the new 7th edition of APA, which we were using to justify the edit that was made. As one of the 3 of us who actually looked through the final draft with all those edits, this extra rationale was extremely helpful to me personally and allowed me to apply those rules to the other chapters I was taking that final look on. The example here shows a slight difference in process, as Mantra Roy's chapter was one that our U of R students edited, and you can kind of see this at the top. Those students, they created their own Google Doc and made changes there. They were also very thorough in writing up a summary report of the general changes and the reasons for each of those. There were 8 students in the class, and they paired up to work on 1 chapter each, so 2 students per chapter. Comments from the students suggested that working with a partner allowed them to learn from each other and play on each other's strengths. One student mentioned that this project was a real bright spot at a time of fear and disruption when the pandemic hit. For these students, the bulk of their efforts on the assigned chapter happened as school was shutting down during COVID. The instructor has provided us with feedback that the Google Docs nature of this assignment could not have happened at a better time. For the rest of our volunteer editors, we were incredibly mindful that work on this project during COVID would not be front of mind, as our worlds were being turned upside down. Alexis and I deliberated over how to approach the situation. In the end, we wanted to be as caring and flexible about their time and their mental state as possible. And we gave volunteers the option to continue the work at their own pace with some guidelines, knowing that some just might drop out in the end, which did happen. We were incredibly fortunate, however, that a few editors took on more than 1 chapter and we ended the project on time, literally to the day. As we arrive at this final project, so at this point, the screenshot is our Pressbooks version, our final version. This is yet another area where Alexis took the lead and flexed her open publishing muscles. She worked within Pressbooks, which is an open source platform which works very much like WordPress. But she migrated the Google Doc content into its final resting place. I believe she was also working with some colleagues at SUNY Geneseo to implement a number of helpful features, and we'd like to highlight a couple of those on the live sites. Let me see if I can get there. So one of my favorite additions, and this was another suggestion of Alexis's, due to COVID affecting all of us, she thought it would be great to offer the authors the chance to write a preface and really situate their context within COVID with the publishing of their chapter, but as well as the content within their chapter. So different chapters will have this at the beginning of their writing, but I will just notice right here, Alexis wrote this one on behalf of the book and just what our process was like when the world turned upside down. And Kristen and Bob, if you wanna help me navigate, you can talk about some features that you like in particular.
Sure. So under the open student projects, the And Still We Rise chapter is a fabulous example of inclusion of multimodal images and videos. They're very, it just really enriched reading the chapter and seeing a video of their event that they had and the exhibit. I thought that was really beautiful to have in that chapter, and it makes it more interactive. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is the adoption form, which is at the end of the table of contents. And in this case, so again, another interactive element of this book is that after reading some of these chapters and deciding to adopt a certain practice or a certain lesson plan or a type of work that one of the authors did or the students, that people can fill out the form and include that, and it can be mentioned as part of the book. So it's still living and it's exciting to have an interactive text like this.
And I was just going to call out, in the spirit of this being a very practical, hands-on, design for use book, we also included actual lesson plans within here. So that the readers of the book can actually not only read about what happened, but they may also be able to actually look at a specific lesson plan as well. So just again, something that we thought made this book, one of its unique features that made it particularly useful for what we wanted it to do.
So we're each going to talk about lessons learned. I'm going to start with just logistics. This was a big project. And in fact, that's what I want to talk about, that the project management aspect of this work was incredibly daunting. We were using key collaborative tools, and that helped keep the work going bit by bit. But we also knew that the pace and level of work would come in waves. So we could brace ourselves for the really heavy work times, knowing that there was some light at the end of the tunnel, and then we could kind of take a break, and then it was the author's work or it was the peer reviewer's work. So my word of advice here is don't let the work discourage you. Like I said, many hands make light work, because the end product is completely worth it. As you can tell, we're all very excited about this project. So we had a couple of discussions at the beginning of the submission process that we weren't getting many proposals from community colleges. And we know that they are leaders in this world of OER. So we were trying to figure out why that was. But we really had to understand where community college educators were coming from, in that publishing requirements do not necessarily forward their bid for tenure, nor do they typically have the support for this extra kind of work. So we had to be cognizant of that. Similarly, we needed to check our assumptions with submissions that came from outside the US. I think we were a bit naive in assuming that we have the same approach to library-faculty relationships as others did in the world. And that really comes from 2 of the submissions that we received from abroad, where we didn't really see those connections being made. So we needed to take a step back and really challenge those assumptions, and moving forward, have a little bit more kind of openness to the product rather than just relying on what we knew in the United States. Kristen?
So another lesson, learning by doing. So I think for me personally, it was on a couple levels. So immersing myself in this and learning about other faculty and librarians projects for their classes with open pedagogy, it helped me get a sense of things that others were doing and what it meant to practice open pedagogy. And now I am working with a faculty member where we're working with her students to create that they can create OER. So it's learning about this stuff in a very active way and then getting inspired. And it's still intimidating, but knowing that others have done it, I can pull it off. So I'm just going to go with that. But it's been very inspiring.
And I'll just speak to the last 2 bullet items. And these are probably more personal discoveries that I'm sharing rather than maybe not broad lessons learned, but something that I kind of discovered through this. One is that just the enormous amount of creative work that's going on out there that needs to be recognized. So we're glad we play a role in that in terms of libraries and faculty, in terms of what they're doing together. There's just a lot out there. So I was really pleasantly surprised to see all the good stuff that's going on and so much of it. So we're really glad to actually publicize and get some recognition for the people that are doing this work. And there's got to be so many more out there. So that's just a realization. And the other thing was just that it was really good to see, this is more internal, how really to create a successful project like this on our end, it really took lots of different people with different expertise and specialties, whether it's in open, whether it's in writing, whether it's in copy editing, whether it's in having the contacts and whatever. So having a diverse team with people, like for anybody that's in the audience thinking about doing something like this, really try to get people with a wide range of capabilities and skills, and everybody can bring something really special to the process. So.
Okay, so with that, this is really our last slide. And we wanted to end with this idea of, I heard this at a keynote address at the Open Ed conference last week. Indigenous librarian Jessie Lawyer, who you see at the bottom there, she tells us that learning about the work of opening up isn't doing the work. And so we really have to do the work to make this more inclusive. And for all the contributors, authors, editorial board members, peer reviewers, etc., we are extremely proud from Open Pedagogy Approaches that we've all taken this giant step forward by doing the work. And we anticipate that this is just the start of greater things to come. So with that, we leave you with our contact information. On the bottom corner here, we have our next author workshop coming up on Monday, dealing with Wikipedia, and we will open it up for questions. And I'm just gonna do a little credit slide here. I have not been monitoring chat. I don't know about Bob.
I know there was at least one. I think, Sarah, if you don't mind, I think you mentioned something early on about wondering about getting high quality open source. Is that correct, if I remember it correctly?
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much, first of all, for sharing your experience, your perspective. It's really intriguing to hear about this entire process. And yeah, that's just kind of top of mind. I'm in the process of course design right now, and I'm trying to nail down like what's going to be my textbook for this neuroanatomy course, or textbooks, or resources in general. And I'm thinking like this would be such a great time, like right from the start, integrate these open access resources. But as I go hunting for them, I can't find any that like consistently hit the level of detail that I want, or I could find, one good chapter over here or one good resource over there, but then it's a scattershot approach that's kind of chaotic. And what's the, trade-off on that with having students go from one source to another, to another, to another? Can they really keep it straight? And then I find I also worry like, what if they go away? We got burned by this over the spring semester. We were trying to recreate a hands-on lab course for undergraduate neuroscience students. And they're supposed to do what we call an atlas test, looking at pictures of a rat brain, well, looking at actual slides of a rat brain. And we found an atlas online. It was open access. And midway through the week when we were administering the exam, the site went away. Like, that was not even in my list of things that could happen. So now I worry, like, what if I choose something that's available freely online and I base my course around it and tell my students it's there, and then it's not? How often does that happen? Yeah.
I think we can open it up to everybody to share with this. As you know, we are newcomers to this, but there are ways to pull down some of this information and put it on a localized file so that you don't lose it. And for me, that idea that there's something over here and something here, like, that's kind of the power and excitement for OER for me, is that you can take all those things and maybe put them in one place so that it doesn't look scattered, but you kind of clearly designed it to flow together. At U of R, I don't think that we have an instance of Pressbooks, but through the conferences I've been in recently over the past couple of weeks, I've seen courses like literally developed in Pressbooks. So they put all that stuff in there, and yeah, they're able to kind of remix and mash it all up there. But I open it to anyone else for Sarah's.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Sarah, are you aware of the different hubs where educators and academics can share open source materials? There's some really good ones out there, and their name escapes me, the Kim or Alexis or someone else actually remembers them. But there are some really good hubs out there that focus just on providing that. I don't know if you've come across those or not. If not, I'm sure we could either put them in the chat or send an email afterwards.
I don't think I have seen them. I'd be very curious to learn about them.
Yeah, okay. I think Alexis maybe just put something into chat on that. I know there's at least one or two really good ones that do a good job of filtering, curating, and even search and browse and add your own too. It's open, of course, for people back and forth. But.
And if I can add, I think Sarah probably knows this, but neuroanatomy, the more detailed it goes, the harder it is to find those works right now. A lot of cases, they're going more for the more basic things because that's 300, 400, 500 students. But that doesn't mean that, like, if you find some things and cobble them together, that could be something that you shared on Merlot or an Oasis, like, this is how we put this together, and start to build that up. That would be one of my thoughts in terms of you could help fit some of that gap by just sharing, this is what I did, and it's not perfect, but it's close, it's getting there.
One final thing, I'll just chime in. You guys are doing a great job answering this. Students, as long as you're intentional and tell your students what's happening, they will be with you on this. They will be fine with jumping to different sources, and yeah, they may show you where the flaws are or make suggestions, or it's kind of fun to invite them into this process. But I've definitely had that kind of messy looking course for a semester or two, and then kind of let them help me refine it, and they're on board. It's a great question. I really appreciate that.
And Alexis, this is Eileen. I'm one of the people who is sort of behind the scenes on the book. But one of the things I would think is when students come and there's a textbook and it's, published by Pearson or whatever, then it's like, well, that's the only thing it could be. And they don't get that sense of knowledge is a growing thing and is a changing thing. And I wonder if, like Alexis has found, when you have things from all over, it gives them that better sense of not that there isn't something true right now, but that the textbook isn't the only place to find that sort of information, and that ability to assess and think about and to actually say, this chapter was terrible, can actually be really helpful, because if you hate the textbook, it doesn't matter. Often as a student, that's what you're stuck with. Thinking about and engaging with and saying, oh my gosh, did you just see somebody posted this great video of their work and it was NIH funded, so they've made it open or something. That might be a really good way if your class has that mindset. I think, like Alexa said, it has to be from the beginning. Otherwise, it looks like slapdash, like I'm just pulling it together with no goals. So.
Yeah, I like Elaine's comment This is the great part of open pedagogy too. I think when we see a gap like this, we can consider how we might partner with graduate students or others who could actually help create what's not there. So it could be an opportunity. And I know with a lot of my colleagues here, for example, at this talk, this presentation, over the summer, finding alternate resources for faculty so that, maybe the students wouldn't have to pay for a certain text if they were using 2 chapters, or it's been a really creative kind of period of figuring out what other kinds of sources could fit in a patchwork of information in the syllabus. So it's definitely been a resourceful, creative time.
I'll just add kind of along the same lines of the question from Elaine about, how graduate students or others can contribute. When I went to hear the Robin DeRosa's talk, one thing that really stuck with me, and it still sticks with me, is this concept of trying to get rid of what's called the disposable assignment. And I really, that really bugged me, like to think about, that the students, they put a lot of work into something, they may be adding to knowledge, hopefully, if they're doing a really good job. And then what happens to it? So often it just, the professor reads it, they give it a grade, and that's the end of it. But, if we can tap into that to be part of this larger scholarly conversation where appropriate, where it makes sense, to teach the students about how they can be contributors, even if they never thought of themselves that way, to add to the body of knowledge, to kind of, where possible, avoid this disposable assignment. I think it's something that's really empowering, for the student, obviously, and just makes the whole process richer.
Yeah, this is Elaine, by the way. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for hosting these. I've signed up for all the sessions, so I'll probably see some of you.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm an instructional designer at JMU in Virginia, and so I work within the libraries. But that's exactly the point. I work with a lot of faculty specifically on developing digital projects and integrating digital scholarship into their courses and into their teaching practice. And it's my favorite thing to do, like to have the faculty start to think about these things and try these different assignments and watch them grow and watch the students feel so empowered about creating things that go out into the world and get used, and the creativity that comes from that. So I know, Sarah, I think neuroscience is amazing. I'm definitely not a neuroscientist, but I can imagine potentially, some cool projects that could happen if you have the time and, capacity to dig into the work, right?
I love your idea too, Elaine, about including graduate students, and a really great opportunity for them to build their experiences too. I really like that idea.
We have some faculty that are doing some that teach upper level and intro courses, and so not quite graduate students, but close. And one of them in particular, she's history, and so she's working on these students publishing on PubPub in the upper level course, creating these like research kits, right? So kind of like doing the foundation work, and then her intro level course is going to be using the research kits. So like it's when the faculty, I don't know, yeah, when they get into it, and they feel proficient and comfortable, it's the things that people create are really amazing. And some of these chapters, I was reading through some of them, same thing, very inspiring.
I think we always give the little piece of advice too, that Rome wasn't built in a day. So just starting with one little assignment, and then as Elaine and others have said, like it's a little bit of an addiction, right? Like you see the success of that, and so you want to build on it. So little bits at a time. Okay. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. We hope that you will come back like Elaine for all the different sessions. All of the chapters are just so exciting. As I mentioned, Lily is still on the call. She is one of the chapter authors, and she will be presenting sometime in January. But thank you all. Like, we really enjoy talking about this experience. It's obviously been life-changing, I think, for all of us. And we hope to move forward and learn more and more and more. So thanks for sharing this journey with us.